Christian parenting.
Are you struggling to balance your modern life and your faith? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Legacy Dads Podcast with Lance and Dante, offering biblical-based wisdom and that weekly dose of what truly works in men's lives. The Legacy Dads Podcast, real men, authentic faith. Here are your hosts of the Legacy Dads Podcast. They're authentic, transparent, and not always politically correct. Lance and Dante.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Legacy Dads Podcast. My name is Lance, and I'm joined with my partner, Dante. What is up, my brother?
Hey, what is going on? How is life down in sunny Arizona?
Yeah, it's like 80 degrees this week, so I don't know what's going on. It was like we thought it was fall. It was getting down cold at night, and then now it's, I don't know, El Nino or El whatever's going on. But
are you guys done counting yet? I mean, are we still counting, or what's going on there?
I don't really know I haven't been following it down here. I don't know what they're doing. Yeah, I stopped following all that stuff. People are still counting. Somebody's counting. None of our predictions came true, I don't think, for the most part. So.
I think we're out. I mean, we lost some credibility there, buddy.
Yeah. So needless to say, our ability to predict elections is probably not on the radar. We're not going to be able to do that in the future.
Yep. We need to go back to the drawing board on that one.
Yep. Despite all the conspiracy theories, I think, I think
don't get me going now. Don't get me going.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. So, hey guys, Legacy Dads, your weekly dose of biblical manhood. This podcast is for men, husbands, and fathers in all stages of life, where we promote and advocate proven biblical principles for leaving a lasting legacy. So Dante, hey, what's been going on with you guys up there?
We are about to take a turn with public school. The boy is going to be e-learning. A couple weeks, so I think starting Monday, up till the Monday before Thanksgiving, and then the week after, and then we've seen some spike in some COVID.
Yep.
The girls are still going to school, mask all day, but we're seeing some spikes in some Midwestern states. So a lot of people are thinking Indiana could come out. The governor just gave an executive update order on Friday, and pretty much still leaving churches open to do what they want to do in moderation. And for the most part, Indiana is still above the curve, I think, in a little bit as far as being proactive to worship and to businesses, but obviously being very, very sensitive with schools to the outbreaks in COVID.
Yeah, and it's, I was looking at the numbers the other night, and Jen and I were looking at them, and it's literally, this is the highest numbers we've ever had. And but on a positive note, if there's anything positive about it, you can look at it. Yeah, the infection rates are the highest they've ever been, but the death rates are not necessarily what they were back in March or April and things like that. And I think part of that is doctors are getting, and medical staff are getting a handle on this thing and realizing what the symptoms are, what some of the treatment mechanisms you can use. Like I know they've had, as far as in therapeutics and stuff like that, they've had some really good success not going straight to like ventilator or those types of things, and focusing more on using like inhaled steroids and things that have actually helped out a lot so not worsening people to the point where they have to be on ventilators and things like that. So I think as far as the healthcare staff and the medical staff has really come a long way, I think, in the last however many months we've been doing this now to try to figure this thing out, and they've actually been coming up with some positives. And who knows, we supposedly have a vaccine here. We'll see if it gets rolled out here in the next month or two. But it's kind of crazy, but we may be dealing with this thing again over the holidays and all that type of stuff.
How is the mental health keeping Jen busy? Cases, depression, anxiety, fear, is that really taking a toll on her industry and practice? Busy and just coming out of the woodwork? Or
yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. That's what we're just going to talk about today on this podcast.
Did you like that one?
Yeah, that was a very good setup. No, so Dave, we're going to talk a little bit about some positives of COVID, things that, I know some of you parents may be like pulling your hair out if you've had the kids home all this time, been locked up or been homeschooling or e-learning or whatever you're doing. But there is some positives that's coming out of this. And so we're going to focus on that. Yeah, the mental health rates have been up. I'll I'll talk about that. We'll kind of talk about that in the third area. But the first two areas I think are very positive, and these are both. This is my wife who does child and family therapy. She kind of noticed some of these things. They're just some things I asked her about, and she brought these up. So we wanted to talk to a little bit about this today, and hopefully maybe this is positives for you. If anything, it's maybe we're trying to just look at things through rose-colored glasses. Yeah, that's how we say that. Yep. But no, I think there is. I think these are actually absolutely some positives. And so I'll tell you the first one, Dante, is that a lot of kids have been actually very excited because families have been spending more time together. And so, if we used to have this hurried lifestyle, or, if mom and dad were working outside of the home and just things were running crazy, there wasn't a lot of time for just family spending time together. But a lot more kids have been saying, at least telling my wife in therapy and stuff like that, that they've actually liked all the time that they've been able to spend together as family. And not only that, but just sitting down at the table and having meals again and, playing games and doing things like that. So that has been one of the positives that she's seen, at least Jen's seen, is families are now spending a lot more time together. I don't know. Is that what you're seeing on your side of the house? I know you guys are spending time together, but I mean, is that kind of, would you say the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so in our situation, we have, like I said, in Indiana, we still have, kids going to school, the olders, 5 days a week, the youngers, a little bit more of a break, in between with some teacher days and all that, or they'll do intentional e-learning. But, you're right. I mean, the time that we have together, I mean, even when I look back when COVID was really outspoken, March, and then as we got into April and May, just the stress of it. And, we could certainly focus on the negative aspect, of family and the stress and the jobs. And, if you have a dual income family and you're trying to manage, where before you had childcare or you had school, now you're trying to figure out how you're managing that. So I don't want to minimize that stress. But, I think we want to focus more on taking the negative and making it a positive. And I think if you look at it that instead of looking at it as a curse or a burden, like sometimes I think in life, we just get so busy with the things that we have to do. We forget, especially as adults, when we don't have the looking glass of our kids' eyes, and seeing just how wonderful the world is. As parents, we forget to dream and we forget to be excited and we forget the blessings. But I think honestly, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, if you just look at counting the blessings that we're in a situation, for as much as we can make a bad out of COVID, we can find the gem in what Lance is saying, that we're spending more time together. And I think, it gets us to appreciate each other more. It gets us to look at technology, not as a curse, but as a benefit that allows us, for those of us that can work from home, to have an income, to keep things going, and overall to figure out a way to complement each other. And I think, to Lance, how is it working with us? I would say the big thing that really hits home with us is the cohesiveness. I think, it's really put Kate and I on the same page, working together. If I got to, stop work for a few moments and drive some of the kids to school, or just helping them, get online or doing some different projects, it's really, I think, team building. And just kind of, we look at it from a standpoint of, we could get, stressed by the monotony of just the COVID, or we can take it and turn it and spin it and say, no, we're not going to let something even as serious as COVID own us. We're going to take this as a blessing, that we have the blessing of family, we have the gift of family, and we can spend more time with each other in a way that works together.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And then, and speaking of e-learning and homeschooling and online parenting, so this second one, it was actually, I had to laugh when Jenny told me this, but she said that a lot of parents are realizing that our school systems pretty much suck. And the things they thought their kids were learning in school, a lot of parents were really shocked when they brought kids home and had to get involved in the learning and the e-learning. And I was specifically when it comes to things like, whether it's, what do you call it? Civics or government, or, just some of the things that, the things that we learned growing up in the school that we just assume, if you haven't been, in a classroom for a long time, you assume your kids are learning those same things. And a lot of parents were shocked. And, Jen said that a lot of parents have decided now that based on what they've seen coming from the education system, and we did a podcast on this a while back, Dante, on, what our kids are actually learning in the education systems. Mm-hmm. But a lot of parents have said they are not going back to public schools or at least the traditional. They're going to stick with online learning or homeschooling once this is all done, because they finally saw what their what their kids are being taught. And I didn't expound on that. I don't know if that's, politically or from a faith-based side of that or whatever. But I think it was the biggest thing that, parents are being more involved in their children's education, and some lights started going off and realizing, like, why aren't you learning these things? Does that make sense? Did you guys see that?
Yeah. And I mean, even in some programs that you have, like, how is your kid going to be at the specified requirement to graduate that grade level and or go on to higher education or learning? And I think, and to just put one caveat to what you're saying, Lance, I think certainly there are some in the profession that, get a gold star, that are, knock it out of the park and all that. There's others that are being overwhelmed by fear and anxiety and just letting this COVID thing own them and just panic. And, a lot of the things that we're seeing in public schools around us is, you have superintendents of all of the schools in our county that are actually having to man classes and teach them because teachers are out. So not only are you lacking the quality by which you're hiring staff, but then I think what you say is, like, common core math and some other things that, for us should have been basic skills. We're complicating the heck out of it that, in my opinion, are not life qualifying skills. So I do agree.
Yeah, I would. Let me just, I'll say with that, Dante, is, and what we said in our other podcast too, we're not saying teachers and administrators are at fault.
Absolutely.
It's more of the system and the curriculum that we've said, this is what we need. We see that as probably lacking more than anything, because we know teachers are out there doing their best, the administrators and the staff are doing their best. But it's like, it's what we said before. When the system is broken, it doesn't matter how great, the teachers are. If the system,
you got to fix the system.
Yeah, we got to fix the system. So no, good point bringing that up, Dante. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
And so in that, I mean, even, we had experience of one teacher that was actually prescribing YouTube videos for a particular skill set. And we're like, okay, what are we paying, in taxes and school to just have our kids sit home and watch?
Go
YouTube
watch Khan
videos?
Academy. You'll learn everything you need to know about math.
Exactly. And it's like, if we're going to do a life skill, hey, let's learn a trade, or let's do some other YouTube videos where we can do some electrical or plumbing, and put you to work around the house versus watching a YouTube on this class. And so it's a little stuff like that I definitely think, administrators, teachers, parents, especially parents. I mean, if we're honest, the schools for the most part have our kids 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and then we look at what we have the rest of the time. And I mean, not only are we seeing an uptake in the stresses of our kids, doing homework from, god awful hours of, 3 in the afternoon, 4 in the afternoon to sometimes 10, 11, midnight. And we got to sit there and say, what systems are we putting in place that are dividing the family, taking more and more time away, versus there's a way to do things that are time appropriate, family sensitive, and makes more to the balance of life. And, we can sit there and criticize, the medical profession for some doctors maybe lacking bedside manner, or from other professional services that lack customer service. I think the same can be true in the education. If the system is broke, parents, we need to be more involved, in the everyday aspect of not being a helicopter, staying away from that aspect, but definitely being a part of being involved in every aspect of our kids' lives. Obviously, from a Christian standpoint, knowing what's going in, what are they being fed? What are they learning? Does it have a biblical application? Is it something that is true and can be challenged and proven by scripture? Or is it something that we're just believing, because the public school system tells us? And even in private school, it's up to the parents to be aware, to guard our kids' minds. I mean, obviously, we can make a case if you're going to have a certain lifestyle, teaching a bunch of 5-year-olds acceptance when they don't even have a clue of what sexuality is. And it's things like that that just make my blood boil, not about personal lifestyle a person is raised, but things that are just getting fed to your school in tolerance and acceptance and all that. And to me, it's like, I'm not going to, put on, a horror murder film, for a 4-year-old, 10-year-old, a 13-year-old, since, common sense says that's the worst thing you can do for a child's development, for their psyche, for their confidence. And yet we're going to put our kids in a public school system or a school system that is failing them morally and philosophically and educationally, and sit there and say, why is that okay? And so I think when we look at it in that lens, from a biblical lens of being more involved in education, parents now as a way of, again, flipping the negative to a positive. Here's COVID. It has put us in this situation that we're spending more time together. Now we're involved more heavily in the education. And a lot of us are like, hey, I don't remember half the stuff I did back when I was in high school or grade school. Now you want me to learn this stuff all over again? And I'm not taking that, but flip it to a positive and sit there and say, wait a minute, I get to be not only the gatekeeper and the key master for my kids' mind to expand in a healthy, loving way, but now I can sit there and look at the system that we know is broken, and teachers, parents, administrators, educators, mental health, you tell people what you're seeing out there. Let's have an honest conversation. The system is broken. Let's fix it. Let's give the good fruit where education is just off the charts and reward that. But where, Common Core or some other things that have some major breaks or nonsensical way of teaching or understanding, let's challenge it. Let's buck the system and come together with our administrators and say, there's a much more common sense way to do these.
So here's the other thing, Dante, that Jen was saying too, is that, so a lot of parents will realize, so again, when you hear, if you've got a 10th grader, 11th grader, whatever grade, complaining about homework and things like that, a lot of parents were we go back to when we were in school, and it's, and seriously, this is, parents were like, well, when I was in, half the time I wasn't paying attention. I was looking at girls in the classroom. We were goofing around, and I got through it. So I don't know why this is so hard for you. And one of the things that a lot of parents are saying is they didn't realize the quantity of work they are putting on their kids these days. And then in turn with that, and they were saying it's so much quantity of what they expect, not necessarily quality, but there's this focus on quantity, not quality. So the amount of homework and the amount of stuff they're piling on the kids, and then in turn figuring out that, wow, this is really stressing kids out, because with all this quantity of work they're putting on them, the school system, our education system, is basically saying, hey, if you don't get this, if you don't figure this out, if you don't pass this class, you are going to be a failure in life. You're not going to make it, and kids are terrified. And my wife was saying that sadly she's had to, work with school systems and sat in with school systems. And when you have a bunch of teenagers sitting in a room and you need to keep order, the fear-based and shaming is usually the most effective way to get people in line. So you tell people like, hey, you need to sit down and shut up and learn this. If you don't learn this, you're not going to get into college. Well, now these kids are stressed out to no end because they're sitting around trying to figure out, if I don't know this, I'm not going to get into college. If I don't get into college, I'm never going to make it in life. What's going to happen to me? And parents are finally now kind of realizing this, that, wow, there's a lot of homework, a lot of work required, way more than when we were in school, that they're putting on kids these days. And then the added stress of our kids are being told if they don't learn this stuff and they don't know it and they don't master it, that they're going to be failures in life. And it's been a big wake up call for a lot of these parents. A lot of these parents are like, I had no idea. Now they're empathizing with their kids and realizing, I can see why you're stressed out, because they're asking for all this. I mean, this is way too much work for one person to try to do. And it's almost like the level of work we used to do in college is now what's kind of expected at the high school level. And I don't know if you're seeing that as well, Dante, but it was it was surprising that parents were finally realizing this, that, wow, our kids are overworked and stressed out. And again, it goes back to what you're saying is it's not necessarily, are we focusing on quality or quantity? What are we doing here?
Yeah, and I think of two of our podcasts before where we get into a book and a study, and the other one is critical thinking. And I think when we take an open and honest lens, I mean, the numbers don't lie, folks. Suicide rates are higher. Fear, anxiety is off the charts. And not just COVID, but from the just the pull and the demand on our kids to check the box and to achieve, instead of really understanding more about quality, and having a life that's well balanced, and understanding that it's okay to have passions and hobbies. And the fear and anxiety that we're putting on our kids, even limiting sport and social clubs that they can have under the guise of live in fear, live in a box, be sheep, and do as Big Brother government tells you. And the reality of it is there are things that we can do, in ways that really challenge and give ourselves, a helping hand. And I mean, if you're not aware of the stats, Lance and I can put that on Facebook, but literally we're driving kids to mental health issues. And we can sit there and say, well, that's not on us. We're the parents. We need to be more active. We need to be more involved. And I can tell you, from two kids that have special needs that we raise, ADHD and some central processing disorder, executive disorder, they really have to go over the hump. And, even with a 504 plan and stuff like that, not all the teachers understand it. The education doesn't get it. And it's just go. And we have to advocate. My wife is a huge advocate, particularly with some teachers that are clueless. And I don't mean to take away or diminish. It's just understanding, for some reason we got off the value of a person and we made it more about the value of a corporation. And we need to get out of this business that a corporation has the same rights as a citizen, even though those are laws, and take it back to the value is in the life that God has given us to grow and to understand and to learn and to give him glory and honor. And, I take this all into, let's put on our biblical lens, Lance. And the idea is, if we take the biblical lens, we sit there and say, is every aspect of our kids' lives as students in a position to give God the glory in all that they do? And so if the time is just spent in overtaxing, overstepping, and usurping what should be really a priority for the family, that's bad time management.
Yep, absolutely.
And got to be pushed back. And same thing with, is it to achieve? You're never going to succeed in life. You suck. You're a failure. All of these things. What are we trying to do for our kids' long-term health and well-being? And the idea is, if they're sitting there stressed, they're sitting there freaking out that they're never going to have the same quality of life as mom and dad because, like you said, the system is failing them. Parents, take out a hammer, a jackhammer, a stick of dynamite, or whatever you need to do to challenge the systems at hand and say, enough, no more of this. Let's look at ways that are common sense and figure out ways that we can have balance of time, talent, and treasure for our kids to find their maximum potential without the fear and anxiety of stresses that we have as adults on how to put bread on the table, how to pay our mortgage, how to do all that. Our kids are at a time right now where they should be dreaming, enjoying life, and being able to just expand in many different passions to find out where they want to hone their skills and where they want to spend their career versus making them panic about everything, Lance.
Yeah, and the thing I wanted to bring up too is that so we had something similar to this in the military a couple of years back, and I'll give big credit to Mad Dog Mattis when General Mattis was the SecDef. He basically put a stop to this. So there was so much, the military is such a politically correct organization that we had classes for everything. We have diversity classes, inclusion classes, sexual assault and harassment classes, how to not commit suicide classes. I mean, there was all these classes on everything, and it was about really, it was a CYA. It was nobody really paid attention. It was to make sure that if somebody got in trouble, the lawmakers came asking, the Department of Defense could say, well, we taught him a class on this, and they, here's his certificate saying he completed this class. We don't know what happened here. But what we found out is a lot of this, it's called mandatory training. And, commanders were saying that in order to just the mandatory training, this politically correct stuff that the military was pushing on it, it was going to take up to 60 to 75% of the year just to complete this mandatory. And this is talking, we're at war. We're not even talking about, preparing to do your mission. This is just all the excess stuff, the political stuff,
all the compliance,
stuff. Yeah. And all this stuff was like, you had to be taken online or you had to sit in classes. And, the General Mattis basically said, wait a second, are you telling me that rather than being, combat effective, ready to take on our near peer partners and our enemies, we're spending 60 to 75% of our time in these classes that, they have to do over and over again. Some of them you have to do every 3 months. And, Mattis finally said, this is ridiculous. He's like, we're going to cut out, a huge majority of this, and we're going to push this down to the lowest level commanders. And those commanders, we're going to empower. If they say that their people are trained and they feel comfortable with it, then we're going to give them the freedom, the flexibility to do that. And we're not going to make this mandatory for everybody across the board. And so, Mattis went in and literally gave back, 50% of leaders' times to be able to go and work with their soldiers, work with their troops and things like that because of this bureaucracy. And I think it's the same thing that, we as parents kind of need to look at that. And, again, we can't fix the education system, but maybe looking at that and saying, is this really, where most of our time needs to be devoted? So Dante, let me get into this last one here. We could wrap this thing up. So the third one that my wife noticed was that parents really needed to start being having self-care for parents. So parents, it's funny because my wife will call or she's trying to do a talk and she's there to talk to the kids, but the parents want to talk to her for more than the kids want to talk. And the parents, everybody's struggling right now. People are struggling with the COVID situation, with work environments, with trying to be at home. But parents are realizing that, hey, I need to take time for myself. I need to take time out to pray, to do something, to go do whatever my form of worship is. I need to just do that to get myself straight. And the other thing, Dante, we talk about, Jenny brought up something called co-regulation, and what co-regulation essentially is, it's, kind of the best way to have it say it is, it's kind of what we talked about many times on the podcast, but warm and responsive interactions that provide the support, coaching, and modeling children need to understand, express, and modulate the children's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So what they're seeing is that if a parent is panicked and worried about COVID, the kids are going to be panicked and worried about COVID. And that whatever the parents are modeling or feeling in the home emotionally, that's being transferred down to the kids. And, Dante, I'll never forget. So the other day, there was a little, I happened to be listening and I heard, a little kid talking about, they were worried. A 5-year-old was saying they're worried that Joe Biden's going to be president. And I'm like, what, why are they, okay, if you want to talk to your kids about politics at 5 years old, but anxious. This kid was having anxiety, about the presidential election and what was going on and what are the results. And I was just like, man, they had to be hearing that from their parents. I'm just like, okay, I'm like with teenagers. Okay. I get it. But 5-year-old, really, that's the last thing they need to be worrying about right now. They should be out playing. They should be out having fun. They don't need to be worried and getting anxious about, is it going to be Trump or Biden? And that's just, I think as parents, we just have to be cognizant of that, is that the way we react or the way kids see us, our emotional state, it's going to affect them. Does that make sense to you, Dante?
Yep. I wholeheartedly and amplify or, magnify if you're 20%, 30%, 60% freaked out, probably turn that up by 30 to 40% additional to what you're transposing on the child. And, parents, whether you want to admit it or not, single, married, divorced, blended family, all of the above, you need to be really careful in language, and you need to discern, like, what is my kid's capacity to handle stress, capacity. You're not going to put them in a pit full of snakes or into like a murder, horror film or anything like that, at 5 years old. Then certainly things that you're talking about, I like that in the sense that you're co-regulating and really, putting it in the context of what is the best to protect my child, not to shy away from getting them to be involved in the world, but being in the world, but also having ability to have a biblical lens and understand that, even if our worst fear comes true, to this 5-year-old that you're saying, here's the one thing that we can turn that conversation and say, even if we have a bad ruler or a bad leader, and whatever your political lean, left, right, or center or it doesn't matter for this conversation. But the reality is that as Christians, we can all agree that it doesn't matter who's in office, who's the president, because God is on the throne and in control, and he's sovereign over every ruler, over every nation. And that's the hope, and that's the confidence that we can have, is even if it doesn't go the way that we desire, it's not the end of the world, and nothing surprises God. And that's the confidence that I can start instilling in my kids. And so that's a challenge to you. So Lance, taking a look at this list that we have 1 through 3, I'm sure some of the parents, man, I'm behind this, Lance, Dante, this sounds great. What are some ways that we can really get parents involved? And I'll just start throwing some thoughts out there. Get involved. And if you're not, in your school board, get involved in your local community, in what is happening. Get involved in the education committee and what you're doing. If you have gifts in these things of education, you have gifts in ways that are going to help your children learn and actually be appropriate, don't sit back. Don't be the ostrich putting your head in a hole. Get out, start talking to other like-minded parents and get a consensus of growth, and get involved into where you can start making lasting and beneficial changes for your family. If you're at home and you're okay, Dante, Lance, it sounds great that I should be enjoying this time with my family, but my husband's working, I'm working, and we have young kids and we don't have childcare. What do we do? If you're involved in a church, you're involved in a small group, it's having honest conversations about what it stresses you are, what you can manage, what you can't. And, until you start vocalizing those things and those needs, maybe you have some neighbors that have parents that aren't working, or neighbors that have that flexibility that they'd be willing to step in for a couple hours while you have a Zoom call meeting, or you have other things. And that's the thing, is when we do these things together and we help carry each other's burdens, are some ways that we can make a difference in people's lives. Yeah, and one of the things we've seen here too, Dante, even with childcare, is just what you said. Like, parents are now saying, "Hey, I'll take the kids this day, you take the kids that day," and then we're also seeing, and I really like this. I've seen this where in our military community that we're in, is they can't open the big childcare centers where you have 30 kids in a room. So what they're doing is they're empowering, people that want to do in-home childcare that maybe didn't have the opportunity before, and they're saying, "Hey, here's a way to have some extra income. Here's a home-based business. You can have up to 5 or 6 kids. Here's the, sanitation, all that." But it's creating small business opportunities for people, especially people that are home, or maybe they're not working right now. It's providing some opportunities for that. So there's always positives. We just gotta dig in and look for some of this stuff. I think you're absolutely right, Dante. Good words.
Yeah. So with that, I think that's about it. Does that make sense? We made it through it. Yeah. And I think, honestly, I'll say it. I'm going to be the first to say it, Dante, and everybody's going to hate me, and you're going to hate me. So if our God's in control and we trust our God, and Joe Biden is president, then God's got a plan, and we just have to trust in that plan and figure it out. And I don't know what that plan is, and I'm not God, but I'm trusting in my God. And like you said, my God reigns, and no matter who's the president or whatever, and whatever, I don't care. I can find positives in everything. So,
You have to. I mean, because what hope do we have? And our hope is in our Heavenly Father. And that's the thing, is if we get so lost on people of this world to define our joy and our happiness, where does your joy come from? And our joy comes from the Lord, and our strength comes from the Lord. And that's the thing, is that we have to find that joy again. And parents, the challenge to you is on this, is you go and some of these things that Lance and I say are giving you a pat on the back, a high five to you, keep it up, and, share on some of our closed Facebook groups, maybe what you guys are doing, or recommendations or questions that you may have. Likewise, if you're listening to this and you're feeling convicted, have an honest family meeting and an honest conversation with your spouse beforehand, and really try to figure out where you can make a couple 1 to 2 degree changes to try to get to where that you're honoring the family, and in such honoring God by honoring the family.
Absolutely. And that, guys, as always, we want to say, hey, thanks so much. Thanks for the guys that came and hung out in the virtual gathering the other night with Dave. So Dave did this thing on like I've kind of done before too, but he did the whole, like, if a pilot goes down and you lat longitude, and he was showing how that if we get a little bit off course, like, we could end up way off the mark. And how do we get, if we're not focusing our lives on Christ, how do we get back on the mark? And Dave did a really good talk on that. And a couple good guys that came in there, and actually one of Dave's old chaplains came and joined us too. So it was a great meetup. So thanks for the guys doing that. And hey, stay tuned. I think what we're going to try to do, if Jeff's listening out there, we're going to try to get Jeff to come in and do a virtual meet too, and talk about discipleship and some of the stuff. And, Jeff can just talk for 2-3 hours. So we'll just, as long as people can stay on there, maybe we'll try to do that and get Jeff in and do some of those. But we want to do another one of those virtual meetups soon. So check out the Facebook group, because we're going to we'll try to get it out early so people can prepare and get ready for that. But we appreciate everybody coming out. And with that, guys, as always, we love you guys. We're praying for you guys. Leave us a great 5-star review. Hit us up on Instagram, Facebook, all that other social media stuff. Hope everybody's staying well out there. We love you guys. Take care. We'll see you next time. And God bless.
God bless.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Legacy Dads Podcast with Lance and Dante. Real men, authentic faith. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit legacydads.org and on Facebook.com/LegacyDads and on Twitter @Legacy_Dad. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on the Legacy Dads Podcast. Real men, authentic faith.